So when we're talking about ethics, in my view, the most important ethical principle is no killing of anybody around you unless you're defending yourself. That's basically the fundamental rule of civilization, the main social contract. So when we're talking about moral realism and we're trying to discuss whether or not ethics are objective, what we're really trying to do is prove that no killing except in the defense of yourself is it's deterministically part of the objective physical environment that we have emerged from before we've made any choices. So this is something that would transcend choice. A lot of the identity particulars that you see, religion, nationalism, these are all choice-based, post-existence, post-being. They come together after they exist by determinism, and then they come back and they subvert determinism and they say, my subgroup, my identity, my essence is more important than the deterministic emergence. And that's the fundamental sin of identity particularity. If we can argue that ethics is objectively founded, and let's just say, I don't consider it 100% objective because the planning and we sort of cap it off with choice, with subjectivity, and we make the final moves subjectively. If 99% of it is objective, that's 99% of pure justice that can be used to prove that people that are led by identity particularity are truly guilty of this first sin, the first sin of turning your back on life, considering life in general sacred, not life within subjective particular containers that you've decided this container must be eliminated or that container must be eliminated. We're all on this planet together and we have to feel a little bit of discomfort in order to respect the sacred nature of life. Subjective, particular separation and exclusion is the core of unhealthy behavior and needs to be filtered out of civilized society, and the discussions about objective morality are there to solidify pure justice and hold down the sacred nature of the beautiful emergence of life. This is the fundamental principle. The preservation of life is never to be compromised by any individual or subgroup at any level of power at any time. That is idealistic, I know, because history is we pull these tit for tats out of history, and so justice, when it applies to history, becomes messy. What I'm sort of skirting the edge of here today is moral realism, the idea that ethics is objective fact. Here's the definition of moral realism from the first couple sentences of the Wikipedia page for moral realism. Moral realism, also ethical realism, is the proposition that ethical sentences express propositions that refer to objective features of the world, that is, features independent of subjective opinion, some of which may be true to the extent that they report those features accurately. It goes a little deeper, but I'm just going to say ultimately it goes back to the is-ought arguments. Are you defining what is by describing it, or are you adding a little ideology in there to point in a certain direction? So the holy grail is, can we anchor human goodness in objective reality and get a unified, universal metric for justice? I developed a little cheat sheet. Okay, so this graphic, you have your means and you have your ends. When we're talking about what our end goals are, this is the most important thing, I think. A lot of people will say the ends are relative. Who's to say your end is better than my end? I just wanted to say the deterministic end goals are not limitless. I mean, there's a balance between the different options, but those options are pretty much set. You're either preserving life with utility or you're not. So you're preserving life or you're doing anything else. And then there's confusion. Those three modes, all people's points of view come in different combinations of those three modes. So here you have objective reality. So you set your goals, okay? And the best goal, the top goal, the most functional goal is to promote human flourishing and avoid human suffering. Some people set goals that are self-serving, so they don't set that top level goal of of the preservation of life. And then there's some people that just don't even understand that they're even supposed to be doing anything. Let's say in the end, your goal is to preserve human life. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to evaluate objective reality to see how you're going to get to that goal. Then you're going to set ethical principles and plans. And then you're going to watch and observe the consequence of setting those principles and plans. So if I start to see negative consequence, then I'm probably not going to change my goal, especially if it's the top level goal. But what I'll do is I'll change my principles and ethics to achieve a low consequence, cleansed mean, and my end will stay the same. Now, if you have a wrong end that's not doesn't have human flourishing in mind, and you change your ethics and principles to reach that goal, you start to produce results that are good in the consequence area, but your end goal is still selfish for you. You're never going to get credit. People are never going to give you credit for those positive outcomes, because in the end they know that you're just pulling power to yourself. And sometimes I believe consequences can coincidentally be good even though the ends are selfish, like you have a benevolent king or a benevolent dictator. No one's ever going to give you credit for those short-term successes. So just people out there, conservatives, right-wing people that happen to get lucky or see things in a short-term manner and they can produce good results, yes, you're never going to get credit for that, because we all understand that utility is the top level and that we can produce good means, good consequences by having a good ethic and having the right goal. If we give you credit in the short term, then we've actually moved the process further along here to the end goal of, a king or a dictator, in which it's not a good thing, historically speaking, okay? So means and ends. And so when we're talking about relativism, I believe, a lot of what relativism is revolves around this end goal and people saying that everybody's end goal is just their opinion. But I think utility is the fundamental end goal here. Any reasonable person would say utility is the end goal. We observe the consequences. We keep the good end goal, which is not relative. We use correspondence theory here and scientific method to observe objective reality. And so, like what I say, religious people add extra context here next to objective reality, and then they try to eliminate objective reality, and they attack the processes that we use to measure and show objective reality. And the goal is to give them the ultimate freedom to have a particularized goal, their subgroup as the main goal. The preservation of life is never to be compromised by any individual or subgroup at any level of power at any time. If you have good causes, but your process is weak, you'll be listened to and forgiven. But if your ideas have destructive end goals, even if they are productive in the short term, nobody will give you credit for them or respect what you have done, because to do that is to support destructive end goals. It's all about the end game and consent among the populace. Sometimes there's triage situations where there's only bad outcomes, but we still guide ourselves through those situations by limiting the destruction of life as much as possible. If you guys like this kind of philosophical subject matter, help us out by liking the video and subscribing to the channel.